Hi guys, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. Okay, so let's get you guys updated with the latest goings on with XRP and HBAR for the week. So starting off with XRP, we have them #1 in RWA inflows, surpassing Ethereum. Very interesting. So yeah, there was basically a chart that was done, and basically XRP was #1 for RWA inflows with 1.9 billion, and I believe Ethereum was second with 1.6 billion, if I remember rightly. And so yeah, this is to me is like an indication of where we're going when it comes to this type of use case, right? And just XRP when it comes to utility, right? So I know Ethereum is obviously the top 2 cryptocurrency right now, but I've said this in like numerous of my videos. I think that's really more just down to, well, 2 reasons, to be honest with you. One, because, you know, it's one of the earliest cryptocurrencies, so it's just got that first mover advantage, basically. And then 2, we actually know with the SEC lawsuit that there was foul play with Ethereum. You know, the people at Ethereum were playing dirty to try and basically, you know, get themselves exempt from certain things. And they also wanted Ripple and XRP to be attacked. So we know that that played a part in XRP and Ripple, you know, the hindrance in their growth. Like, and, you know, to a certain degree, they were successful in that, right? And so Ethereum does have the #2 position. There was a point back in like, I think it was around 2018, 2019, where, you know, XRP and Ethereum were actually neck and neck. Like, that's how close it was. They would change on any given day between XRP and Ethereum. So that's how close it was. So now you're starting to see when it comes to utility, XRP is actually surpassing Ethereum. And the funny thing about this is that, you know, RWA wasn't XRP's focus for a good while. Like, it's only recently started to go into RWA because the big focus was cross-border payments. That was really what Ripple were trying to make the big use case for XRP. And as of, you know, recent years, they've kind of started to realize that cross-border payments isn't going the way that they'd hoped. Not to say that it's a complete failure, but it's clearly not going as successful as they would have wanted it to. So they've pivoted to other things, and one of those things being RWA. And in that short time span, they're already leading the charge. So that shows a lot about XRP as a network, if you ask me. And I do think that just shows the potential to surpass Ethereum in the long term, because we know that Ethereum's, you know, tech is basically outdated. So yeah, I think that just shows a lot for the future with XRP. Okay, we've then got the burn rate myth. So this is something that I wanted to cover because I wanted people to understand this with like the XRP influencers who keep talking about, you know, XRP becoming scarce and, you know, a very limited supply. I just wanted to basically help people understand how all this works. So there was an article where it said it could take XRP 720,913 years to reduce the supply to like 500 million tokens at the current burn rate. So as I was saying in the video, like, the first thing people are going to say is like, well, yeah, the current burn rate, of course, because, you know, nothing's really happening right now. But once XRP gets adopted and we're talking about like the $10,000 stuff and all that kind of thing, then obviously that's going to dramatically reduce the supply because the burn rate is going to be so high. So yeah, look, the first thing I'll say is just, I'm going to be quick with this because I've already, you know, got a full video discussing it all. But even if you was to, you know, greatly increase XRP's burn rate, Ripple have spoken about this before. So they actually question like, well, what's the longevity like of this system that you guys use, XRP in a network? Because one of the worries was, is this something that we can use forever, etc.? Or we're going to be worrying about, you know, the supply running out and that being an issue. Ripple basically said, look, even if XRP was successful beyond our wildest dreams, it would still last for 70 years at least. That's even the best case scenario. So even if XRP was completely, you know, more successful than they could have ever imagined, they still said it would last 70 years. So the whole thing about people talking about the burn rate, it's really not, it's not what these influencers make it out to be. It's just not. So this is another one of these things where they talk about unrealistic things to try and, you know, basically view engagement and farm engagement and whatnot and get views to make it like this is how it's going to make great money. And look, we've got an example of what happens when you burn the supply already with XLM. XLM burned like half of their supply and it did absolutely nothing. It didn't change the price whatsoever. So keep talking about doing this. It's not going to do anything. Like, the main thing that's really going to bring value to XRP is utility, because there's got to be demand there. Because like, let's just say you do burn, you know, half the supply. If no one's using it, it doesn't matter, right? So it's one of these things where like, that's not going to change anything. So at the end of the day, like the whole thing about, XRP's burn rate being one of the things that's going to like greatly increase the price, it's not, because the amount that it would take to get to that kind of level of increasing the burn rate to such a high degree where there's just like barely any tokens left, like you got to understand how much XRP is actually burnt for each transaction. It's really not a lot. It's like minimal, right? It's like 0.001 or something like that. Like they call it in like drops because it's so small. So it's really not going to be anything like significant. So it would take ridiculous amounts to really, really make an impact. So yeah, like the whole thing with the, the burn rate and stuff like that, like dramatically increasing the price, it's just not accurate, guys. So that's just one of those things that, influencers use to just try and engage with farmers, stuff like that, spreading, misinformation. Okay, we've then got the XRP proposal. So yeah, this was done by, I think it was a Dr. Chris Cormack, if I remember rightly. Let me just double check that. Yep, Dr. Chris Cormack, yeah. So this is about a UK climate finance proposal where they used XRPL as the infrastructure for renewable investment. So two things you got to understand about this, like this is a proposal for a pilot and also it's a proposal. So this was sent to the HM Treasury, so UK government basically. So this doesn't like guarantee that this is going to happen, right? It's a proposal. And second of all, they're talking about a pilot. But the thing I'll say now, like if we think about, for example, MasterCard did a pilot, the pilot was successful. They went full steam ahead with it. They've actually decided to take it on. So just because it's a pilot, that doesn't really mean anything. We know we're at a point now where like crypto technology is being adopted. So the first thing I'll say is like, it is a proposal. So it doesn't mean it's guaranteed that it's going to happen anyway. It's something that the government can review. Then it'll be up to them whether they actually like take it on board or not. But when I went through the proposal, it really wasn't a hype proposal. It wasn't one of these things where it's like, unrealistic stuff that they were saying. It was just like using XRP as basically like a data layer. And the thing that was good is like, they wasn't trying to use it as like a replacement, right? They wasn't saying like, oh, use this instead of banks or anything like that. It's like, no, this is where you use the network, but the banks and the institutions can use this technology for themselves. And I think that's good because, it's not about trying to beat or compete. Like, it's about like, hey, the banks can use this technology too. That's adding to its utility. It means you've got the big players using the technology rather than having to fight for who gets what. It's like the banks can still use it to do what they need to do rather than having to compete. So I think that's a good thing personally. I don't know if it's actually going to be accepted. As I say, it is a proposal. And even if it's a proposal, it is a pilot. But to me, it shows you that you've got a person here of intellect who's saying, XRP would be the ideal blockchain to use for this. And also, we know that we're in an age where crypto is being piloted now and it is being adopted. So it's very possible that that could happen. So I thought that was really good to see. And I do think there's potential there for that to, actually come to fruition. Okay, so moving on to Hedera now. So we've got Hedera Agentic AI with a learning context protocol. So what's this in regards to? So what we've got here now with Agentic AI, we know that it's going to be big, right? It's coming into a fruition now where this is going to be one of the big things that can add a whole lot of new utility to these hash graphs and blockchains and whatnot, right? So if you can have like these agentic agents making payments and stuff like that, like you can scale these networks, to thousands of transactions daily, if not more, right? So this can really bring a lot more utility to these networks. And so the thing with this is, obviously it's great, but we've got to make sure it's all being done in a safe way. So we need to know like what rules they're playing by, what laws they're following, and what happens if something goes wrong. And so Hedera are basically working with a company to ultimately try and like create like a rule book. That's basically a simplistic way I can put it. They're creating like a rule book so that if anything happens, where's the data going to be? What was the rules that was followed? What's going to happen now it's gone wrong? It's going to be that kind of thing. So it's basically putting things in place so that the AI has got stuff that it needs to follow. It's keeping it in a safe way. So when you think about the possibilities of what this AI is going to bring, it's great, but it needs to be safe. It needs to be, correct, because companies, institutions, etc., it's all good using this if it's, nice and fast and you're not having to keep monitoring stuff and whatnot. But if it keeps making mistakes, it's not going to be worthwhile, especially from an institutional perspective, because if these like AI agents are making mistakes, it could cost them fines. So it could get them into trouble. So they're not going to risk it. It's not going to be worthwhile for them if it's going to be a thing where it ends up costing them in fines. It doesn't matter if they're saving like a bit of money here and there, because the fines could just outweigh that altogether. So they're not going to risk it if that's the case. So this kind of thing that they're trying to put together, this LCP, yes, this is going to be something that's really going to help try and put it in a safe way. So these AI agents know, what they're supposed to be doing and making sure it's all safe and compliant. So definitely something that could be big for Hedera, because I think Hedera's got the technology to really be able to benefit from these AI agents. Like, it can scale to 10,000 TPS. So this is where it would be great to use Hedera for this type of use case. So knowing it's one of the networks where I think could really benefit, it could be one of the bigger choices for this type of utility. I think that having this in place is definitely something that's going to be worthwhile. So really good to see that. Okay, then we've got a post of an interview, and it was somebody talking about, it was someone from Kia Credit. I think it was Dano Silva or something like that. I'm really sorry, I can't remember the name, but just talking about fixed fees. He was from Kia Credit, and basically he said look, we don't even look at fees anymore, because on Hedera we know that it's going to be fixed in USD and it's not based on a token, so we don't even need to look at fees. And he's saying from a business perspective, this is why this is such a great thing. And yeah, this is absolutely great, because a lot of obviously networks, the way they do their fees, it's all based on the token. The problem with that is obviously the token can change in value. So, if you're in a bear market, it can be significantly lower, but then you go into a bull run and it could be significantly higher. And then, if we use Ethereum as an example, we know that Ethereum can get congested, and when it gets congested, it has a lot of failure, right? A lot of transactions don't go through, and you're still having to pay those fees. So imagine you're in a bull run now where everyone's excited and using the network. Imagine you're a business and you need to make this important transaction. It's vital you do it, but you keep trying to do it. It's costing you a load of money because you're in a bull run, so that the token's significantly higher. And also, when you're trying to do it, it keeps failing. So not only are you spending a lot of money trying to get it through, but it's not going through anyway. And maybe that means that you missed the deadline that you needed to make the transaction, or you can't do it that day. So you have to wait till, an evening time or something like that, or the next day, so it can calm down a bit. You don't want to be doing your business that way. That's just not good. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's such a simple thing, having it in fixed fees in USD and not in the token. But it's massive for companies. It's also in terms of them scaling and predicting their costs, right? So if they want to say, okay, this is how much we're going to need to spend on transactions this year and whatnot, they can do that with Hedera because they know exactly what the cost is going to be. It's not going to change. Again, when you talk about Ethereum, you don't know. It could be high one day, it could be low the next day, and you don't know when it's going to happen. So you can't predict anything in that regard. And it could be a problem because those fees can get expensive. Please just understand, I've been in a bull run and I've seen what it's like to use Ethereum in a bull run, and it's an absolute nightmare. I remember when Bored Apes came out, the NFT, and that was massive. And people were trying to get the NFT, and they're trying to mint it. I know someone who paid something like $3,000 to $5,000 in fees trying to get it minted, and they never even got it done. So imagine paying that much in fees and that you never even actually got it minted in the end anyway. That is not good. So that's not something that, companies are going to want to deal with. Not at all. Not when there's alternative options. So it makes a big difference. Okay, finally, Hedera with Merced AI. So this is for AML compliance, and this one for me I think is a big deal, and this is because I've got a bit of knowledge of how all this works. So Merced AI is basically working with Tamam OS. It's basically built for institutions, and it's all about compliance, right? So when it comes to banks, the two big things that they must follow legally is AML and sanctions, right? Now legally they are required to follow these two big things, right? This isn't a matter of choice, it's a matter of law. They have to. So what this system does is it monitors transactions, crypto or just normal transactions, doesn't matter, and it'll check for any AML concerns. And so it's going to be able to do that without human interaction. Now, as I say, with banks, this is something that they have to follow. So this is a big deal because it's taking away that middleman of having to do this for them. Now, I do still think there will be an element of needing human interaction, but this is going to be the layer that can basically filter out the payments, right? So it's kind of going to act as like a blanket, right? So the AML system will be basically checking through the payments, and it'll be looking for red flags. And once it hits these red flags, it will put them into view to be investigated further. Look, as knowing how big of a deal this compliance stuff is, this is something that banks are going to want. And as I say, this isn't a matter of, this is ideal or whatever. It's a matter of law. So when you talk about going over to blockchain and stuff like that, these are the things that they need to know is in place. Because again, if there's no compliance and stuff like that, they don't know who could be using these systems. And it could end up leading to the banks getting fines and stuff like that, right? So they have to know that it's secure. So having systems like this in place, I can see many banks wanting to turn to this because it's an extra layer of security, and it could actually help making their investigations more effective. It really could. It could actually make it so that they're picking up way more potential issues and stuff like that, potential suspicious activity and that kind of thing. So it definitely could be really something that aids banks as a more useful tool when doing these types of investigations, right? Sanctions and AML. So I think this is something that a lot of banks would want to use personally. We'll see how it goes, but to me, it just makes sense. And I think this is something that could bring a lot of custom to Hedera, because like, as I say, you got to understand that AML and sanctions is important for every bank. They have to follow this. It's something that they can't mess around with. It's a matter of law. It's a matter of their license. It's a matter of their reputation. It's a matter of them getting fined. So it's something that they will have to abide by. So having this in place is something that I think will be massive. So to me, I think the potential for that is very big. So I think that's one to watch. That was Merced AI. Okay guys, that's it. You're all up to date. So I'll leave it there. If you did like this video, please remember to like and subscribe so you can be updated for future XRP and HBAR content. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can be alerted on when I do drop a new video. Thank you very much for watching this, and I'll see you all on the next one.